you ever experienced one or more of these rather uncomfortable or awkward situations? So you have just actually cleared all of your English competency exams, whether they be the OET, TEFL, TESOL, IELTS, whatever you name it. And then it's your first day on the job as a healthcare provider. And you are facing patients that you never thought that you would ever see, in the sense that they are really out of your comfort zone. They are saying things to you that you've never heard of before. And even though you may speak the same language, you find yourself not really being able to comprehend or fully get a grasp of where their challenge or where their pain points are. And you might feel a little bit disappointed to think, okay, I did all this work and effort to actually excel in the exams that I thought would really prepare me to be a good communicative healthcare provider, but I feel a little bit let down. It's not your fault, and you're not the only one who's gone through it. There are some of these misconceptions or a lot of differences that come into the picture of what language represents and what communication represents. And I thought that in this video, I would touch on some of them. So to learn more, stay tuned for the rest of this video. Welcome back to my channel, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Shweta. I'm the founder of Healthy Dynamics. We are a coaching practice that helps healthcare providers from English as a second language backgrounds improve both their language and communication skills in order to become better providers in the healthcare space, build better relationships with their patients, founded on trust and credibility, deliver positive experiences consistently, and stand out on your workplace and as a person of excellence. So, as I have now started to gain more followers on LinkedIn, which is the main platform where I have all or most of my content posted, this is an observation that I have been making recently. So a lot of them, their profiles are written in their native language. So whether it's Arabic or Finnish or Danish or French or whatever the language might be, and they feel that while that really works when their patient base is in the same language that they speak firsthand, and they are also able to speak English decently, or if not reasonably well. And when I'm communicating with them on LinkedIn, because even when I'm typing the words and everything in English, they can easily translate that. And even when they are facing a patient who does speak a little bit of English or speaks English fluently, they're able to manage some of it, if not all. But the challenge really arises when they are communicating in a way, this is the patient that I'm referring to over here, they're communicating in a way in which that is very, very unfamiliar or very foreign to the healthcare provider. Now, let's just say that you have a patient who is from an Asian background. So this person can be Thai or someone from China or someone from Taiwan, one of these countries. And if you notice in those countries, the language is very, very tone-based. Whilst some of the other languages that you have, such as French, English, German, Spanish, they are much more grammar-based. So grammar plays a huge part in these ones. And I'm not saying that in those languages, grammars don't play a part. No, but the real emphasis really is on tones. So if you're a healthcare provider who's not familiar very much with Asian languages, and you have a patient who is speaking to you in very heavy tones at certain points. And you might also notice that sometimes they're dragging out certain parts of the speech, and they are also, being overly nice, or also sometimes they can be quite, they're following it up with a lot of giggle and laughter. And you as the healthcare provider, you're just like, I don't know what's going on. You might be stuck feeling a little bit clueless and lost at that point. And this is despite you having done extremely well in your English competency exam. So you have now you're now in a situation where you've done your OET, you've done your IELTS, you've done everything, and you now feel okay, I've got the know-how necessary to do my practice now, and I can take on patients from all corners of the world. But what they don't really struggle to understand is the fact that whilst it has prepared you with English grammar, English vocabulary, English nuances of the language itself, Communication itself is a completely different ballgame. And whilst my coaching practice really is both, it covers both English as well as the communication aspect of it, I thought this video I should really emphasize some of the differences that are there between language and communication, and also really clear up a myth or two about what one means, whether one feeds the other, how interrelated both of them are. Can you get better at one versus not being as good as something with the other one? So I just thought that I would clear some of that air that you tend to find in these kind of situations. So I'd start off with three main differences that exist between the concepts of language and communication. So language really looks at what you say, and communication is how you say it. So say, for example, if you use one particular vocabulary word, let's just say, I don't know, a chair or table. Now, I can give you a couple of examples and say, like, this chair was placed, I'm just making up a sentence here. This chair was placed, opposite the table or opposite the couch or whatever. Like in the English language, that's how it's expressed. Now, another difference that you would see in, say, a language like Hindi, which is my second language, is that the chair, table, and the couch, every single one of them has a different gender. So it's not like English where everything that's non-living has a neutral gender. These things specifically have a gender, and this, as far as I know, this is also quite true for the French and German and some European languages as well. So that's where that language becomes different. So when you're saying the same sentence or translating this into Hindi, every single word will be associated with a different gender. Now, when you look at, say, a language like I just mentioned in the very beginning, when you look at, say, something like Thai or one of the Asian languages, the same word, so the chair, table, and the sofa can have the same word, for example, but the tone makes all the difference. So, one tone might mean the chair, one tone might mean, a completely different meaning. So there's that. But besides the point, this is not just highlighting the language, the differences in the language, but it also is about how you say it. So, for example, in a language, you might know all the words, but how you convey or deliver that bit of information to somebody else makes all the difference. And I'm not just talking about, written communication versus verbal communication. I'm talking about all the really subtle things about communication that are becoming much more visible and prevalent these days that, a lot of communication specialists really talk about. So improvement of language skills, how to become more collaborative communicators and things like that. So that's where, even if you know the language very, very well, if you don't actually are attuned with what your audience is like, so in this case, what your patients are going to be like, and you're not really aware of how to actually convey that information or communicate that information, that is going to resonate and get a response from that patient of yours. Even though you know the language, if you're not able to communicate it, it's not going to have the desired impact. So language looks at what you say, as I said at the beginning, but also communication is about how you say it. So that's the very first difference. Number two, language is foundational, whereas communication is dynamic. What I mean by that is that, now let's just say, for example, let's take the English language. We have had more or less the same vocabulary of words that you find in the Oxford Dictionary or say Webster's Dictionary. Those are still very much the same. And I think now, after the millennial and Gen Z movement, you've had some new words such as selfie and this and that that have been added. But my point is that very rarely will you find new words or something new being added to it. So this is just in the space of vocabulary. The rules of grammar don't change. The pronunciation doesn't really change. Many, many different things. So that is and this is all the foundation of language that has been existing for centuries, literally. Whereas communication is completely different. That is changing by the second, by the minute, by the year, by the country that you come from, by the culture that you speak to, the group that you're in, the company that you work for. So that communication is going to be different in every single situation, in every single circumstance. And also communication really, really depends on who the person on the receiving end is. So in this case, your patients, if you're a healthcare provider, like the very example I mentioned in the very beginning, even though you may be speaking the same language, if you want to say deliver a bit of bad news to a patient. So whether it's a case of talking about a terminal illness, or whether they've had, a miscarriage, or anything like that, or if there's a problem of, say, if they really wanted to have children and you have to tell them that they are actually infertile and are no longer able to do it. In those situations, how you convey that information is very much aligned with what you are like as a person, how you communicate your information to somebody else, and also the person on the other end who is going to be receiving it. So for example, if you take that example of infertility, a 20-something person who is very early in their life and they are from a culture that really emphasizes on having children, and they really, really want to have that in their life, it's one of their life goals. And if you were to communicate that to them, versus if it was someone from, say, another cultural background, or even a person who's a little bit older, who is probably on the fence about having children, and you have to give them the diagnosis that they are infertile, that would be a completely different conversation. So the age group and many, many other factors play into how you would communicate that bit of information. So that's number 2. Number 3, the intricacies of language pretty much vary, whereas the principles of communication remain very much similar. Now, what I mean by that is, like the very beginning of the video that I mentioned, the intricacies of Asian languages is very different to the intricacies in European languages. So there's a difference between tone versus grammar, and the pitch versus vocabulary. In some of the Asian languages, you have to address each person by their age and where they are in the societal or hierarchical sort of background. So, for example, a person who's a lot older than you, you address them by a different pronoun, whereas in the English language or in some European languages, but no matter what your age is, everyone is a you. That's one of the pronouns, for example. So these intricacies are different for every single language, whereas the principles of communication remain the same. So a lot of my new followers have asked me, okay, so my patients are all, the same language that I speak in, and I don't need to learn English. It's not going to really benefit me, because I'm going to be working in the same field and I'm going to be consulting with the similar patients. How will your services benefit me? So this is where I step in and explain that the principles of communication, which is what all my channel is about, they remain more or less similar regardless of what language you're speaking in. So whether it's French, Danish, Finnish, Arabic, English, whatever the language is, the principles of communication, so things like your active listening, your empathy, your showing respect, and the non-verbal gestures, they are more or less very similar, so 99% similar in all languages, even though the structure and intricacies of every individual language is completely different. So this sort of brings me to some misconceptions that people tend to have. So just because I'm fluent in a language, am I going to necessarily become a better communicator? The answer is no. So whilst, yes, having a good language background is very, very beneficial, you have to really train yourself and have an understanding of who the person on the receiving end is. So who your audience is, in this case, who your patient cohort is, what are they like, and actually fine-tune the information, whatever the language is that you're conveying to them, in a way that will not only resonate with them, but also will invoke a response with them. So whilst language fluency is one part of the big pie of what being a good communicator is, it's not the be-all and end-all. And there's a lot of things that you need to be familiar with and tuned into in order to become a better communicator. And I will be doing more videos on this topic in the days and weeks to come. So for those and for all my other videos, the past ones and all the upcoming videos, if you want to just check them out, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and like this video if you got any sort of value or meaning or insight out of it. And as always, thank you very much for your time, presence and attention, and I will see you next week.